Joining us now, Karen Finney, a senior official at the Clinton campaign. Karen, Secretary Clinton says that she is a fighter. So why has she been missing in action on trade, refusing to say whether or not she supports giving President Obama fast-track authority to negotiate a deal?
Well, I think she's focused on the specifics, right? So her position has been, and this is about this trade deal and any trade deal in terms of the underlying deal, and that is any deal has to meet two tests. Number one, she's talked about it last week. She's talked about it a number of times over the last couple of months, that it must protect workers, and that actually must bring prosperity to American workers. And then the second test is obviously our national security interests. And what she has said is that any trade deal has to meet those two tests. And I think what we've seen over the last few weeks is more of a sort of procedural process going back and forth between the House and the Senate, and we haven't actually seen final language. I think that the Secretary believed the President ought to have the right to go to Congress and make his case and try to earn the votes for after he made that case. Unfortunately, on Friday, I think what we saw is that didn't quite happen, and so now we'll see where this process goes from here. But where she has stayed focused is what will the language of what is the final deal? Let's talk about what's in the final deal. Let's judge it on that underlying deal.
Karen, we're not talking about the trade deal here. We're talking about giving President Obama the same authority that President Clinton had on NAFTA, so that when he finally does negotiate a deal, he can give it to Congress and they can either vote it up or down, but they can't amend it. Here is what one of the other Democratic candidates, Bernie Sanders, had to say about that this week.
I think the trade policies have been disastrous. Secretary Clinton, if she's against this, we need her to speak out right now. Right now.
The fact is, Karen, that there is a vote coming up this week on part of the fast-track trade authority, whether or not the president is going to be able to negotiate a deal and then give it to Congress so that they can vote it up or down, but without amendment. As I say, it's the same authority that Bill Clinton had. Does Hillary Clinton think that House Democrats this week, in the next few days, should vote with the president or against him?
Well, I haven't spoken to her about the deal, obviously, since what's happened Friday and what's going to happen next week. But again, this is someone who has voted for trade agreements when she thought they were good for the country and against trade agreements when she thought they were bad for the country. And I would just say, Chris, there has been a bit of maneuvering back and forth about the pieces of the agreement. So again,
I'm not talking about the agreement. Forgive me. I'm talking about giving President Obama the same fast-track authority that Bill Clinton had on NAFTA. Why would she possibly be against that?
Well, but we're talking about it in the context of this agreement, right? We are talking about it in the context of an underlying agreement.
We're talking about it in the context of how he can negotiate a deal and give it to Congress. Well, why can't she say whether or not she's for or against it?
Well, I think you may hear, again, we are going to be talking about a lot of issues. I think you may hear her talk about it sooner rather than later, and I'm going to let her be the person to speak about that.
But there's a vote this week in Congress. Doesn't she have to weigh in pretty quickly? Because if there's no fast-track trade authority, the president can't make the deal.
Well, we'll see, won't we? We'll see if she decides that she wants to go ahead and tell us what she wants to say about it.
But as one of her senior advisors, you can't say whether or not she's going to weigh in on fast-track trade authority?
As one of her senior advisors, I think it's my job to let her be the person making the news in her campaign, or let her be the person saying where she is on an issue. And I'm telling you sort of the broader perspective that she has and again, I do think it's important. You are talking about sort of fast track, but again, the way this has, the political element of this has played out over the last several months, we have had a lot of wrangling. I understand that.
Okay,
I'm going to let my candidate speak to that.
Fair enough. All right. In her speech yesterday, Clinton laid out a broad agenda for how she thinks that the federal government can help the middle class. And I want to put up some elements of this. This is just part of it. Big infrastructure program, universal preschool and child care, clean energy, debt-free college. Question, how would she pay for all of that?
Well, that's part of what she's going to be talking about over the coming weeks. What we have said all along was that, in the ramp-up period of this campaign, when she first launched, she wanted to go out and talk with everyday Americans and talk with them about her ideas and hear what they had to say and what their ideas were, their concerns were. And then we had our launch speech where I actually thought it was a bold progressive agenda, quite frankly. And I think she made her case. She talked about her values. She talked about the influences in her life. And then going forward, forward, what we've talked about is that over the course of the next several weeks, she will lay out put some sort of meat on the bones, if you want to say, specific policies, and sort of how she would accomplish those things. And just to the list that you just put up, I mean, she talked about those things also, Chris, as in the context of, these are critical investments that we have to make in this country to make sure that everyone is participating in our economy. I think that's one of the most important things that she talked about.
Karen, I understand that. I wasn't questioning those items. I mean, people can.
Sure.
I was just simply asking how's she going to pay for all of it, because we're talking about billions of dollars. Let me ask you about another thing that she talked about a great deal in the speech, and that is income inequality, as you say, part of the progressive or liberal agenda. She talked about the fact that the 25 top hedge fund managers make more money than all of the kindergarten teachers in the country combined. What about the fact that until recently she was making $250,000 for a 1-hour speech, where the average American makes $45,000 for working for a year?
Well, I think I would also remind you that she talked about her mother and her mother's very humble beginnings, certainly very, I think, tragic in the way that she was abandoned and sort of the impact that had on her. And I raised that, Chris, for a very specific reason. I think part of running for president, people want to know who you are, what influenced you, what motivates you, not just where you stand on issues, but what is in your heart, and what were the things in your life that led you to believe the things you believe in and fight for those things. Hold on, Chris. And all I'm going to say today is that I think it's important. Yes, she talked about it. I hear what you're saying in terms of, how much she made for speeches. But what's important is that this is a person who has always fought for people who need to have a champion. Why? Because very early in her life, she was very strongly influenced by the idea that there are people who don't have that.
We only have limited time, and I don't mean to interrupt, but I got to move on. Because
I would just say there's nothing. I mean, you can be, given. I mean, she's making money and believing in the importance.
I know.
Of
Maybe the hedge fund
back.
managers believe in it too. So I just wonder why she's saying that it's somehow wrong for the hedge fund managers to make so much money, but it's okay for her to make $250,000 an hour. If I may,
Karen, I got to move on. What you do with that money? It's about.
Again?
But it's about CEOs making the money and then not sharing those profits with their workers. That's part of what she also talked about.
Is she sharing all the money with? I mean, are you making something close to $250,000 an hour? I guess you do. I bet not. Okay, let me ask you about this, because Clinton has taken a hit in the polls recently. 47% now think that she cares about people like you, while 52% do not, and 42% think she is honest and trustworthy, while 57% do not. How do you explain that?
Well, I guess what I would just remind you in the bigger picture, I mean, Hillary is leading pretty handily her Democratic opponents and all of the Republicans. So I think overall, I mean, Mrs. Clinton is still the person who is the top choice. Look, I think at the end of the day, and we have just gotten started in this campaign, and again, she started to lay out her case yesterday. You're going to see her keep doing it. And we believe that at the end of the day, this is going to be about a choice. And she talked about that fundamental choice. And the poll numbers that you put up, we think what Americans at the end of the day want to know is this person going to get out there and be a fighter for me? Does this person understand my concerns, my issues, and will this person fight for me?
Well,
and
when you talk about,
but if you know Hillary Clinton, you know this is a woman who has never shied away from a fight.
People wanting to know what she stands for. The fact is that since she announced 2 months ago, Hillary Clinton has not held a single news conference nor sat down for a single interview. Is that her idea of being transparent?
She has spent hours talking with voters on very substantive issues. She has talked to members of the media.
It's not the question I asked you.
Hold on, Chris. She has talked to the press.
If I may, I don't want to talk over you, but I asked you a specific question. She has not given a single news conference or had a single sit-down interview. One, is that her idea of being transparent? And two, when is she going to do either of those things?
Why don't I tell you this, Chris? I think you're going to see her do that later today, and you'll see that during this tour of the early states that she's going to be doing. And I would say, I mean, you say a news conference, I mean, she has, gone over to the reporters who are traveling and talked to them and answered their questions. And again, I mean, Chris, this issue, I also think it's important. I think that the questions that voters want to ask is equally as important. And I think it's important when you are running for president and we're focused on the 4
reporters can
early
ask
states.
questions for millions of people as opposed to the 4 or 5 handpicked people sitting around the table who, can only ask questions. I'm not saying she shouldn't talk to them, but all the other candidates have met with reporters, have sat down for interviews, have held news conferences. She's the only one who hasn't.
Well, they've got to do their campaign the way they're going to do their campaign, and we're going to do our campaign the way we believe we've got to win this in these 4 early states, to make sure that we are focused on organizing and telling Hillary's story and winning the 4 early states, and then hopefully winning the primary and then winning the election.
Karen, thank you.
Yes.
Thanks for coming in today.
Chris.
Thanks for answering our questions, and we look forward to being able to ask Hillary Clinton some questions as well. We'll see you on the campaign trail.
Okay, sounds good.